as we're getting closer and closer to the end of the beta phase in Dragonflight, I mean, I hope, I kind of want to ride some dragons, man. We are taking another look at Protection Paladin, which has received some changes, and Paladin right now is in a weird state. I sincerely offer my condolences, Paladin mains, but that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Is Prot Paladin better than the other two specs? I don't know. That's what we will discover together today. And listen, if you like this type of content, consider supporting us on our Patreon page, link down below. This goes a long way into making us able to do these videos daily, whether it is beta spec coverages, alpha prior to this, tier lists, podcasts, the weekly series of mains that we have, and more series to go through because we're gonna run out of classes eventually, not to mention the streams and everything else. Really appreciate it. Check out our Patreon page. Down in the description, you'll find different levels of tiers, different types of rewards depending on where your contribution will be, and we do really appreciate every little bit that we get from you guys. Really awesome. Thank you so much for supporting the content. Now let's talk about Protection Paladin, which I have tested just recently with this current iteration. Now, outside of the general opinions of Paladin, the general talents are kind of okay. Now they've doubled down, not doubled down, but they've kind of like shaved the meme a bit about the steed, the divine steed being a 4 talent point node. Now there's still 4 talents in total for the divine steed, but Seasoned Warhorse and Seal of the Templar are now a choice node, which yeah, I'm not. I still don't like so many points into Divine Steed, unless they just buff the points. Like Seasoned Warhorse increasing the Divine Steed by 1 second, being the potential 3rd talent point that you put into Divine Steed, definitely does not feel like it's bringing enough. Like if I'm gonna put so many more points into this one only mobility ability of the Paladin, I want it to feel more impactful. Not to mention that the current Divine Steed and Shell Lens last for way longer, and it feels still sometimes not enough. But it's fine. We're not going to talk about what it would be enough. I'm talking about why are we not getting what we already have. This is something that I personally I'm a little bit disappointed by. Now, going from Cavalier, which gives you the 2nd charge of Divine Steed, you have Holy Aegis, making armor and critical strike increase by 2% per point. You have 4%. It's likely something that you're going to want to get. I mean, armor has been like a really contentious, controversial topic for tanks. For some tanks, it's really good. Armor's role is really good, but the increases in armor are always left for debating because we don't even know ever if it's going to be good, since some tanks have more armor, some tanks have less, and when you have an increase of percentage-wise, it's sometimes not going to matter very much. Although crit could be particularly really good, you still have Cleanse Toxins going down into Golden Path, more utility, the Dispels and everything. Golden Path is Consecration, heals you and 5 allies within it for very little amounts every 1 second. You will want to stay in the Consecration, and since you will always want to be in Consecration, your Consecration will likely only be affecting melee players, and if you have a party of range, this talent is Poopy Pants. It could be good for you, but it's 1 point, and the talent tree for Paladin in general is so spread out with so many throughput nodes that you can hardly spare like average points if you want to, you know, get the most out of your thing. But it does go down to Seal of Mercy, which is the only way to get Seal of Mercy, making Golden Path strikes the lowest health ally within it for an additional 50% or 100% of its effect, doubling down, which is, if you don't like Golden Path, you're probably not going to take Seal of Mercy. Seal of Mercy is a 2-pointer, so it just feels bad, and it's a trend. You're going to go down into Seal of Clarity, either from Mercy or from After Image if you so desire, and Seal of Clarity makes spending Holy Power have a 5% chance on the first point to reduce the Holy Power cost of your next Word of Glory or Shield of the Righteous by 1. And you already have Word of Glory cost reduction from Shining Light from the general talent tree, so I guess this could be good for Shield of the Righteous, although you do have other also mechanics to make Shield of the Righteous free. So, and you have to spend 2 points for this once again. Not a fan. Sacrifice is still going down into the choice node, which is actually kind of cool. This is maybe one of the good points of the talent tree, where Sac being a 2-minute baseline cooldown that reduces the damage taken by the target by 30%, but you suffer that damage yourself. You can take Sacrifice of the Just, reduces the cooldown of Blessing of Sacrifice by 1 minute, or Recompense, which is the new thing. After your Blessing of Sacrifice ends, 50% of the total damage it diverted is added to your next judgment as bonus damage on your next Word of Glory. Now, this is obviously very difficult to optimize as a tank, since you want to be in control of the damage you take, and ideally you want to take as the least amount of damage possible, but sometimes you just have to save your healer or your DPSer, so you do have to take into consideration if you do use Blessing of Sacrifice. And obviously, if you want to use the most amount of recompense, you want to take the most amount of damage as a tank from somebody else, while you're also taking the damage from yourself. So this is controversial. We'll see exactly how good this is. Probably the better Protection Paladins will be able to take full advantage of recompense, and we're probably going to see that in action soon. And going down from this choice node, you have Aspiration of Divinity, another 2-pointer that makes Hammer of Righteousness or Blessed Hammer, depending on which one you have talented. Also grants you 1% increased stat for 6 seconds, and multiple applications will overlap. This sounds like something that you might want, especially with a lot of gear where you're going to be spamming those abilities. And this also goes down into Seal of Might. During Avenging Wrath, your mastery is increased by 4%. Also another 2-pointer. So if you haven't counted them so far, there's a gazillion talent points that you have to spend to get the throughput. This is not something that helped priests feel very good about their general talent tree, not something that have helped any class in the beta be to talent into any talent tree. It feels like opinions will be reserved for the end. Let's keep going and see exactly what other things you would be interested as a Protection Paladin, because you will have other things to be interested as a Protection Paladin. If, of course, still have Unbreakable Spirit, which is pretty much the same. And this goes down into more options. And we can also take a look a little bit on the right-hand side of the talent tree. And if you do take Seasoned Warhorse, which you're probably going to take, you go down to Turn Evil, which is something that's really cool in terms of utility. This is something that we should see more of. Stuff like Turn Evil, 1-point utility wonders, which is something that I really advocate for. And these will go down to Blessing of Protection, which is more likely that you're going to acquire from taking Avenging Wrath in the middle of the talent tree. And going from Blessing of Protection on the right side, further down, you have a choice node of Incandescence and Touch of Light. Incandescence, once again, each holy power spent has a 5% chance, very small percent chance, to cause your consecration to flare up, dealing very little damage to up to 5 enemies standing within it. It's very tiny. It feels very unappealing to take. While Touch of Light, your spells and abilities have a chance to cause your target to erupt in a blinding light, dealing also very tiny damage or healing to allies, or to an ally. I would imagine it has some smart targeting where it targets the lowest HP ally within its area of effect. Again, these numbers are super tiny, and there's throughput, and it comes at a am I gonna put 1 point in here or 2 points into mastery? Like, I don't. Right, we move on. You have Seal of Reprisal going down from Rebuke, which is something that you're probably going to take. Your damage, holy power, spending abilities, deal 5 and then 10% increased damage. This is a much heftier throughput choice, and it goes down to Seal of Reprisal, which increases consecration damage by 10%. I swear to God, I think there's way more, like probably double the throughput nodes than there are non-throughput nodes, which makes it very awkward for any spec to build around it. And the core mechanic of Judgment and Holy Power Spenders in the Greater Judgment, since it's way up to the top, it kind of skewed a little bit how you're going to be playing. And it has replaced Seal of Alacrity, which is all the way down, and Seal of Alacrity is another throughput 2-pointer that gives you 2% haste per point. And you have from the Blessing of Protection, if you go down, you can actually upgrade it into Improved Blessing of Protection, taking it from a 5-minute cooldown to a 4-minute cooldown, or make it into Blessing of Spellwarding, which is now, after the recent changes, only available to Protection Paladin, which, I mean, that's, on one hand, it's pretty cool because Protection Paladins bring something unique to their spec, and it's always good to have something unique to your spec instead of being replaced with the DPS or the healer counterpart as a tank, which will feel pretty awkward. But then again, it's also like a core Paladin theme, and it's stuff that, you know, Holy and Red are using. But that digress. You still have it. You didn't really gain anything either. And on the middle side, you have Divine Purpose and Holy Avenger. Likely, you're always going to take Divine Purpose. It has better functionality overall. It's not a 3-minute cooldown for 20 seconds where you just spam your Holy Power generators. And Holy Avenger, although it's a really beefy cooldown, the overall effectiveness of it can have severe diminishing returns for Protection Paladin, since you're not going to spam that many Shield of the Righteous unless you just really want damage, and you're probably never going to need to heal that much, and if you do, then there's something wrong with your group. So what are you using Holy Avenger for? And unless it's just pure damage, and sure, maybe you want just 3 minutes of cool damage, maybe that's good. Maybe you don't need tanking as well. Divine Purpose is overall more utility, and you can choose what you want to do with it. It happens rarely, and the reason why Divine Purpose is really good is because you can delay its consumption, and you can adjust to the theme, and you can fill in gaps either in your Shield of the Righteous uptime or in your maintaining HP levels, either for you or your party member with Words of Glory, which is what Divine Purpose does. And having a proc every now and again, which is not that rare to be honest, is, I think, in my opinion, way better than Holy Avenger. And with this, we can actually move away from the general talent tree, which is still a mess, and go into the spec talent tree. And overall, of course, we have to mention the elephant in the room. Avenger Shield still does not generate holy power, and I don't know how to feel about this. With a very poorly geared Prot Paladin that I've been able to take into some dungeons, it didn't really feel like I really wanted more holy power, considering that if I had better gear, I would generate way more holy power. Obviously, more is always better, but it didn't feel like losing the holy power generation from Avenger Shield that bad. However, the fact that for years Avenger Shield generating holy power was a core mechanic, a core aspect of the playstyle, is really awkward to play for long-time Prot Paladins. Maybe somebody that hasn't never played Prot Paladin might not have this issue off the bat, but it feels very bad. It definitely feels like the ability is nerfed with regardless of how many buffers Avenger Shield has throughout the talent tree. Now, on the left-hand side, you have Holy Shield, which also has undergone some fat changes that has made Protection Paladins very sad. Holy Shield used to block every source of magic damage taken, even if it was slight dots or slight AoE magic damage that hit you in wave. That was always really good. It was never particularly overpowered. Holy Paladins were never known for dealing with magic damage really well. It just made them okay. Didn't make them really bad like Prot Warriors or Brewmasters, and then didn't make them really good like DKs and Demon Hunters. It was just like average of the pack, which I think it was cool. It was decent enough in terms of functionality. Obviously, it didn't really make much sense to block a tick of Shadow Word Pain or whatever, but it definitely functioned better. And what it does now, it just blocks direct damage attacks, like, you know, your cookie cutter fireballs, which obviously is a big nerf to Holy Shield and not something that Protection Paladins overall love. You also still have the choice node of Consecrated Ground, which makes your Consecrated 50% larger, and enemies within it have 50% reduced movement speed, which is really good in Mythic Plus, or improve Lay on Hands, reducing the Lay on Hands cooldown by 10%. I hardly ever see you ever taking Improve Lay on Hands unless this is in a raid, and even in a raid, you might want Consecrated Ground because the extra size of the ability makes it easier for you to sidestep, shuffle left and right, dodge mechanics, and still be in its effects, since Consecration is very important for protection because it gives you damage reduction. So I don't see Improved Lay on Hands being competitive with Consecrated Ground. 10% is not that amazing. Now, you move further down on the left side and you have Bastion of Light, which was moved instead of Tears Enforcer, which was moved in the place of Resolute Defender. And in the place of Bastion of Light, we now have a new choice node with Improved Holy Shield. And Improved Holy Shield makes your chance to block spells increase by 10%, which is, I mean, that's good, but it's regardless, because you're not gonna have that many spells directly shot at you, unless they just make the new raid that way, in which case I'm probably not gonna play my Prot Warrior or Brewmaster at all. So that's a bad talent. I'm not particularly happy about a Sanctuary. While you're in your Consecration, your damage taken is reduced by an additional 5%, which is likely going to see more overall use. Not to mention that the majority of the damage that you will take as a tank is melee physical damage, aka Improved Holy Shield is very niche for situations where you're just fighting back-to-back casted abilities on your face. And if that's the case, and if that's how the encounter is designed, half of the tanks will really suffer. So this is another one of those. This is so niche that the design of the game will not be favoring this as much, because if it does, then it's an amazing detriment for other specs that don't have this mechanic. Now, Bastion of Light is a 2-minute cooldown, makes your next 3 casts of Shield of the Righteous or Word of Glory costs no holy power. Once again, talking about the Holy Avenger, which is on a 30-minute cooldown for 30 seconds. So Bastion of Light is, you would say it's a little bit more accessible. Having it on a 2-minute is definitely more reliable. In my years of playing Protection Paladin, I've never had a situation where for 30 seconds I wanted to blast consumers back to back. Not to mention Bastion of Light will require was basically making them free, while Holy Avenger requires you to put a generator in between every consumption to generate the 3 holy power. Resolute Defender is pretty good, and it's way to the side, which is really awkward because this is something that you would expect to see in the middle of the talent tree. Resolute Defender is a conduit right now where each 3 holy powers you spend reduces the cooldown of Ardent Defender and Divine Shield by 1 second. It definitely affects Divine Shield now, which is actually slightly better, but it was mostly used to reduce the cooldown of Ardent Defender, giving you uptime on the ability to make sure that you can survive high intakes of damage over the course of a longer period of time. And we keep going down on the bottom left-hand side of the talent tree, where Farron Marcus's favor, I don't know this person, increases the damage of Avenger Shield by 15 to then 30% to its primary target, and then this goes down into Moment of Glory, a 1.5 minute cooldown that makes for the next 15 seconds you generate an Absorb Shield for 20% of all the damage you deal, and Avenger Shield damage is increased by 20% and its cooldown reduced by 75%. This is actually really cool. I don't recall outside of the cooldown reduction for Avenger Shield being in place, this normally would reset the cooldown of your current Avenger Shield, but it also gives you the Absorb right now, and I think it might have increased the damage, but this is about new. This feels more like a Capstone now, and it's something that I kind of like. I like its functionality. It definitely feels very Captain America-y, so this is what I mentioned where there's been a lot of increases to Avenger Shield potential, not to mention there's the capstone that goes into it that buffs Avenger's Shield in a neat way. We talked about that before, but I'm not gonna go into it this time. And from the Ardent Defender down, now you'll have a choice node with improved Ardent Defender, which actually makes the ability way better, from a 20% damage reduction to an additional 10% for 30%, which is, I don't know if this is what we have now in Shadowlands, but 30% DR on a 2-minute cooldown for 8 seconds. That is going to be reduced by Resolute Defender, because it's, if you're going to need a lot of Ardent Defenders, you're probably going to take Resolute Defender. It's actually not that bad. And with that being said, this is where, at least in the announcement that we've had in the previous blue post, is Blessing of Spellwarding will make its way over here from the general talent tree that we mentioned. So we'll see exactly what happens with this talent. Sentinel now works, and we could test it out, and it's actually okay. I mean, I'm not 100% convinced that it's better than Might. This is something that needs to be tested with the content and theory crafted upon. It's always good that we have choices, but then again, we don't know exactly how good these choices are. And going from them, the 3 talents, Guardian of Ancient Kings, Gift of the Golden Valkyrie, and Righteous Protector, were moved up by 1 line, which is good, but there are still 2-point talents which feel incredibly awkward. Not to mention that Gift of the Golden Valkyrie is still bugged, where we get instant resets on Guardian of Ancient Kings, which is silly, because then I cannot get a feel of how good this functions in actual combat. So after so long, this is still bugged. And Righteous Protector now also affects Guardian of Ancient Kings and Avenging Wrath. Well, always effective Avenging Wrath, rather. And it's, again, a 2-pointer, and this feels so many heavy point investments into all of this thing. And they both are like on opposite sides of Eye of Tyr. So if you want, you can take Eye of Tyr and go down into the bottom side of the talent tree, where you have Faith's Armor on the left side. Shield of the Righteous grants 10% additional armor as a 1-pointer, closer to a capstone. Like, I don't see the logic of this talent being a 1-pointer, while Gift of the Golden Valkyrie is a 2-pointer, and why Faith of Faith Armor is there. Maybe possibly so that you can take Valkyrie and go on the left side and not feel like you have to be cornered down into the middle, let's say, which doesn't really make any sense. But maybe that's a good thing, making Righteous Protector and Valkyrie feel less restrictive into going into the middle, which is good. But the fact that there are 2 talent points kind of rubs me the wrong way. And Final Stand is also on the opposite side, making Divine Shield taunt all targets within 15 yards for its duration, which is really cool that you don't have to sacrifice a lot to get it, as you would sacrifice Righteous Protector now on live. And all the way down to Bulwark of Righteous Fury. Avenger Shield increases the damage of your next Shield of the Righteous by 30% for each target hit by Avenger's Shield, stacking up to 5 times and increases radius by 6 yards. Still capped. It's really good. It's the legendary that we use now to deal massive damage, and that's always really awesome. And if you do end up pathing more towards the right-hand side, you might notice Barricade of Faith being an interesting mechanic for 1 point. When you use Avenger's Shield, your block chances increase by 10% for 10 seconds. This is a theme that we're seeing more and more with Prot Paladin, where they want to focus more on block, which is something that Prot Warrior definitely knows more about, but it is something that's weird because, once again, block percentage chance is something that is very RNG for a tank to cater its survivability against. Now, whenever you get block chance is not bad, but when you have to choose if you do get more block chance or something else that's guaranteed, hardly ever a tank feels good about gambling their survivability upon RNG, which is something that's very hard to understand unless you play a tank in heavy content. But I digress. Let's keep going. Crusader's Judgment is really awkwardly placed. I am not particularly a fan of it. Crusader's Judgment has been a core mechanic. It's been moved from up all the way to the right-hand side. Judgment now has 2 charges, and Grand Crusader now also grants a charge of Judgment. This is something that should at least be more central, but I guess it's as central goes. You definitely have to path from Hand of the Protector or from other talents going into it instead of pathing it from the middle. I think it would be better if it was here, if you could path to it from the middle side of the talent tree. So I'm not too sold on it. On the far right side, if you keep going down, and you might get to Crusader Judgment this way, you have a choice node between Strengthen Adversity and Crusader's Resolve. Strengthen Adversity makes for each target hit by Avenger's Shield gain 2% parry for 15 seconds. Once again, RNG in terms of your survivability. Or Crusader Resolve, enemies hit by Avenger's Shield deal 2% reduced damage to you for 10 seconds. Multiple applications may overlap up to maximum of 3, which is probably something that you'll see more of instead of Strength in Adversity. You want flat damage reduction all of the time instead of RNG damage prevention. And we keep going down with this to Uther's Council. Your Lay on Hands, Divine Shield, and Blessing of Protection have 20% reduced cooldown, which is a 1-pointer, probably better than the Lay on Hands 10%. Although you can probably stack these up and maybe get Lay on Hands even on a lower cooldown, so who knows. And going down, I mentioned before, if you want to go down into Crusader's Judgment, Strength of Conviction, while in your Consecration, your Shield of the Righteous and Word of Glory have 10% increased damage and healing. Obviously 2-pointers, so it's 2% more. This is actually a not bad talent. This is pretty good because you do want to be in the Consecration, and this definitely promotes that playstyle. And if anything, for a new player, definitely tells them, like, listen, you really want to be in Consecration. And I guess that's particularly really well. And going down to the Capstone, you have Faith in the Light, another 2-pointer to invest in before going into the Capstone. Casting Word of Glory grants you an additional 5% block chance for 5 seconds, 10% if you put the 2 points in. Again, block chance. You can stack these up, of course, and the thing with these, they're at least on the AoE side of the talent tree, where chance to proc defensives is way better when there's more targets hitting you, because you can play the numbers again and you will get it. The problem with this, at least from an average tank's perspective, such as myself, and I'm sure that if you go into the Hammer of Wrath Discord, you'll be able to get more insight about this, is that it comes at a weird place because you cannot control it, so you don't know when it happens. And when you have bursts of mitigation, you kind of want to rotate and weave them in to increase your overall uptime on reducing damage that you take. Because if you've just slapped a very heavy Shield of the Righteous that maybe you even took the Faith's armor to deal, to give you 10% extra armor, maybe you don't want the parry proc chance to overlap with your extra armor, because it would negate the other effect. But you cannot control this because this is RNG. But they could all the way overlap, and for like 1 or 2 seconds you're immortal, and then you dip down because you don't have a smooth uptime on this. This is maybe the main issue with, you know, getting RNG procs on mitigation. If there's a lot of them where it smoothens out in the end, then that's good, but it's hard to do that if you're not in massive AoE consistently, where overall the numbers kind of add up. And this will feel incredibly difficult if you are in heavier and heavier content, especially if your survivability heavily relies on these talents. On a good side, Divine Toll now has been kind of updated, where you still do the same thing, but now it generates 1 holy power per target hit. Obviously, it stacks up to 5 holy power, because you don't cannot generate anything anymore. But this is what they've done to mitigate the fact that Avenger Shield no longer generates holy power, but you can still get a burst of holy power with Divine Toll. This is good if they do intend to keep Avenger Shield the way it is, where it doesn't generate holy power. This is really cool. Maybe we can have more of these talents out there where it can occasionally make Avenger Shield under certain circumstances, or when you get a proc or whatever, generate holy power as well. And it does go down into the Capstone, which Divine Resonance is something that we've known about before, and makes after casting Divine Toll instantly, you just shoot out an Avenger Shield every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. This is basically the Kyrian legendary effect now. While quickened invocations, the cooldown reduce the cooldown of Seraphim by 5 seconds and Divine Toll by 15 seconds. This is what the Mechanicos Soulbind would have done for you in Shadowlands. The fact that it reduces Seraphim's cooldown by 5 seconds is obviously weird, because Seraphim is a capstone in the general talent tree, at opposition with Sanctified Wrath, which I'm finding very hard to justify ever picking Seraphim in a world where you've lost a big source of holy power generation. Because, you know, Seraphim consumes holy power to maintain its uptime. Not to mention that Sanctified Wrath, which is on its opposite side, is just really, really good, and it's passive and doesn't eat your resources. So this is a weird situation with Prot Paladin. I understand that some people like it, and it might seem fine if you just play it and have some fun. But once you go deeper into the spec, like it seems to be with most, and if not with all Paladin specs right now, it starts to boggle your mind at what's going on under the hood. It's basically Paladin as a class, and Protection as a good example is like a very, very cool ass, sexy car that just drives with like 10 horsepower or something like that. It's just weird. I really hope that Paladin gets to be revised, and you have so many good examples out there. If we're talking about Protection Paladin in this situation, you have Protware, that's a really good example. Blood Decay is a really good example. Heck, even Guardian Druid is a really good example as to what you can make the spec do to feel a lot better, instead of having so many points of investment into throughput, not to mention the talent tree. Overall, as you guys might joke a lot about me being very excited about specs and calling everything amazing, this is not it. I'm sorry, this is just not it. But who knows, maybe you like it. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble. I am here to put out my impressions as somebody that plays all of the specs in the game, and with the context of how awesome most of the other specs are, this is just falling very short. But hope you enjoyed this take. Hopefully this can promote some positive changes for Protection Paladin, maybe the Paladin class as a whole in the future. Thank you for watching the video. Thank you, patrons, for being awesome and supporting the content. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.